afternoon. My name is McKenna and I'm an elementary education major with a concentration in literacy. So to begin, I want you to think of your favorite children's book. You can use the picture to help you. There's some classics up there. But think about your favorite children's books. And I would have you share with a peer, but I don't have the time for it. So maybe after. All right. Now I want to share mine. Mine is Stella Luna. Okay. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of the first books I remember reading. I used to read with my grandparents. It just has, it's really dear to my heart, and it helped me fall in love with reading. These are some pictures from the book, and just looking at them, I think of the story, the text, the pictures are just extraordinary. Just listening to it is just really was amazing. It's magical. And I want to become a teacher because of a book like Stella Luna. Because I want kids today to feel the same way I felt as a kid. So, what I decided to do to make sure that our kids are falling in love with books, I did a literacy practices comparison to bridge the gap between literacy practices that are valued and the ones that are used in the elementary classroom. So I want to make sure that the right practices are being used for our students to fall in love with reading. So we're going to talk about a few things. First, we're going to define literacy. Then I'm going to go into two different surveys, one that I conducted, another one I studied. Then I will talk about disciplinary and critical literacy. Then I'll go into what I've learned, how my pedagogy has changed, and what I see in the future. So, Kathy Short, Jerome Harst, and Carolyn Burke, they wrote a book called Creating Classrooms for Authors and Choirs. I read this book in a perspectives class like a year ago, and this class really changed my view on literacy. So they say that literacy is the processes by which we as humans mediate the world for the purpose of learning. So what that really means is we use literacy to navigate the world and discover its many possibilities. There's a few ways we can do that. These are representations of literacy. And there are 6 of them, and you can kind of pair them up. I'm going to define them first, and then go into examples later. So first is reading and writing. Reading is the ability to decode a literacy and construct meaning, whereas writing is the opposite. You code language into a modality and form it into words or pictures. Next is speaking and listening. So everyone does speaking and listening. It's pretty much you go into a conversation and you decode the language and construct meaning from the language, and that's listening, and then reply accordingly, which is speaking. And then last, viewing and visually representing. Viewing is the ability to examine a form of literacy and learn from it by decoding it. And visually representing is when you make a visual that can be viewed. All right, so here's some examples. With Stella Luna again, for reading, you have to decode the words, look at the pictures, and construct meaning from the story. And then for writing, Janelle Cannon wrote the book. She wrote the words and drew the pictures. And then for speaking and listening, in a classroom you can have a conversation about the book where you have to speak and listen. And then for viewing and visually representing, I made these PowerPoint slides so that you could see pictures of the book. So that's visually representing on my part. And then you are viewing the representations and you're trying to construct meaning. From this definition of literacy, I can say that literacy is used all day long. We use it every day, no matter what you're doing. You're using literacy to learn, construct meaning. And this is also true in the classroom. So in an elementary classroom, they have blocks of content areas. So they have a literacy block, they have math, science, social studies. And with this definition, the literacy block isn't needed because you're doing it all day. So you're going to get that literacy in the math, you're going to get that literacy in the science and social studies as well. All right, I'm going to move to the first survey. So the International Literacy Association conducts a worldwide survey of researchers, educators, and administrative personnel every year. And they ask these educators to rate literacy practices into by importance. So researchers rated the hot practices, which are in red, and the educators rated the yellow practices, which are the important topics. And this article is called What's Hot in Literacy. So if you look at the vials, you can see that the hot topics, they revolve mostly around like assessments and two literacies, digital and early literacy. Whereas the important topics, they focus more on equity and access in the classroom. So I'm seeing that they're not really matching up right now. The researchers are saying one thing and the educators are saying a different thing. And this picture gives you a view of all of the literacy practices that were voted on, and I'm still seeing some pretty big gaps. There's the biggest gaps are between 30 and 50% of votes. Like for example, teacher preparation. It has a blue circle and it has a number in it, 46. That's the difference in the gaps. So for the important votes, it was 85% of the votes. And for the hot, it was 39% of the votes. So there's a 46% difference between the hot topic and the important. So the educators are saying teacher preparation is very important, and the researchers aren't agreeing with them. So I'm seeing big gaps between research and educators. And this has brought up a couple questions. So why are these gaps so large? What do they mean? And how is this affecting the classroom? And why does this matter? Because of there's no communication between research and education or the teaching. So there's a big gap between theory and practice. And if they're not meeting in the middle, then researchers are doing one thing, teachers are doing something different, and they're not sharing or trying to make each other better. So that's why this matters. So this has inspired me to do a literacy practices comparison, and I wanted to do an anonymous survey at the school I just finished student teaching at. And I wanted to ask them about how they felt about literacy. So this is a pretty big overview of what I asked. And we'll go through each one by one. So one of the things I asked is, have you read the article, What's Hot in Literacy? No teacher read the article. No teacher, didn't sound like they heard of it at all. Then I asked how they felt about teaching literacy. And 54% of the 13 teachers that took this survey said they enjoyed it. I asked them if they used critical literacy or disciplinary literacy. These are two literacies that I value, and I will get into what they are later. And really only one teacher said that they even attempted to use these practices. Then I asked about curriculum and how they felt about it. And 46% of the teachers said they like it, and 31% said they were okay. They liked it. It was okay. And every teacher said that they modified it. They felt that that was important to modify their curriculum instead of just doing exactly what it said. Then I asked if they were able to teach science and social studies in the classroom, and 53% said they wish they could, whereas only 15% said that they could. So it's not, these two content areas aren't being prioritized, but teachers, it sounds like they want them to be prioritized. I asked these teachers to rank several literacy practices into 3 categories: highly valuable, somewhat valuable, and not very valuable, least valuable. And these are 3 of them. So I asked them if they want their students to read every day, and 100% of the teachers said that they want their students to be reading every day. I asked if they liked using level texts in the classroom. And these are texts that have varying degrees of difficulty, and they're normally from a curriculum. And 0 teachers said that this was a highly valuable practice. However, 61% say it was somewhat valuable. So they do think using level text is important, but it's not the only way to do it. They like having their students have a choice in what text they read as well. Then I asked if they wanted to use phonics as a focus during reading time. And what phonics is when you need to listen to the sounds in each word in order to spell the word and say the word. And this school teaches phonics in isolation. And 61% said that this was somewhat viable practice. So it doesn't sound like these teachers like teaching it in isolation all the time. Sorry, it's not flipping. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, now I asked teachers if whether they enjoy about teaching literacy. Am I not pointing it in the right place? Okay, thank you. These are 4 of my favorite quotes. Getting students engaged and excited about reading books and their own writing. Watching the students make progress and see the curiosity broaden their knowledge. I teach children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Getting to know kids through their writing, getting to know them through their reading and their discussions about books, sharing my love of reading. And seeing the kids enjoy new books and stories. So these quotes these teachers put their kids first. They talk about how they want their kids to grow and enjoy and just be themselves. I think that's very powerful. So I want to talk about awareness. These teachers, based on the definition of literacy and the survey, they don't seem to be the most aware that, thank you, literacy is used all day. And this will make a little bit more sense once I talk about disciplinary and critical literacy. Now, these are pretty complex literacies, and they're a lot more work to put in the classroom, but they're very rewarding. So disciplinary literacy, that's really putting literacy skills in content area and teaching content and literacy at the same time. So teaching your students how to think like a mathematician, how to think like a historian, how to think like an author, how to think like a scientist. And they don't even know that they're learning how to read, write, and think better when they're doing disciplinary literacy because they're so engaged in the content. So with Stella Luna, you could teach geography and what a bat is at the same time as you're reading the book. You could say, this is what a bat eats, these are the parts of a bat, this is where a bat lives, and you could teach using Stella Luna all day long. And critical literacy. So this is very complex, and there are quite a few definitions. But one definition by Hilary Hanks and Vivian Vasquez is the critique of the relationship between language, literacy, and powers, and the lens through which we look at other components of literacy. So it's the ability to read and critique both the word and the world, and then take some sort of social action after the critique. So with Stella Luna, you could look into how she was treated by the birds and compare that to foster families in America throughout history. So you would take primary and secondary sources so that students could understand what it was like for children to live in a foster family and have them compare what Stella Luna went through. And they would be able to have a better understanding of what a foster family is like. And they could take it one step further and see how they could improve living in a foster family. So these two practices spark independence, thinking, creativity, and they really learn from all of the work that they're doing. And they're doing the work, not you as the teacher. So I don't know if teachers really understand, just across the board, that they do disciplinary literacy all the time. They just don't have a name for it. And that's just because of the definition of literacy, how it's used all day long. So they're doing all these things, but they just don't have a name for it. So what I have learned a lot from this. So first, the Institutional Review Board, which is a process that all researchers need to go through in order to work with human subjects. It's a very long process, but it's very, very rewarding. I learned a lot from my survey, and it wouldn't have happened without the IRB. The survey also proved that there is that gap between theory and practice. And now the next step is to fill that gap. Then I would make a couple changes to my survey. So I didn't ask why enough. I asked, tell me what your favorite literacy practice is, but I didn't ask why. And I also didn't ask for enough experiences from these teachers. Like, give me an example of this. How'd it go? And then with disciplinary and critical literacy, I could have asked these teachers, what do you think this is? Because nobody knew what it was. So what do you think it is? How do you think it works? I would have had a better understanding of where they were really at. So next steps for my project, I will continue researching. I want to actually attempt to teach with Stella Luna all day so that I can see how it goes. And I also want to look more into interdisciplinary literacy. And this has given me an opportunity to realize that I need to reflect more on my own teaching. And because of all of this, my pedagogy has grown immensely. I will wholeheartedly embrace the definition of literacy that's just all day long. I will be flexible enough to put theory into practice, even if it may not work. And it might not, but at least I tried, and it might work with other kids better than, each year's different. So I hope that other teachers begin to want to bridge theory and practice in their own classrooms. I hope that they really put their kids first, like the teachers that took the survey do. Because bottom line, no matter what you do, the kids come first. And if these practices that they're using in their classrooms are working for their kids, then they're doing the right thing. But I would like to challenge all of you to go out after this, find a book, read it, and think of how it can change a life, just like Stella Luna changed mine. And share your favorite books with somebody else today. Thank you.